Our message affirmation today is I am created of love and meant to live a life of love. And hopefully people are aware we're going through our series talking about prosperity. And so often when we talk about prosperity, people think about a big pile of cash. But of course, as wonderful as it is to have a huge bank account, if that's all we had, it really wouldn't mean that much. So when we talk about prosperity, there's so much more to that. There's the prospering of the love and the prospering of our health and peace. And the most important of all these things is love, because we are meant to love. So often in life, we find ourselves living, rather than from a place of love, we find ourselves living from a place of fear. And this is, unfortunately, just something that we learn from childhood growing up. Unless you were really fortunate and you had really advanced, wonderful parents who were in New Thought and who raised you in New Thought and never taught you to fear. But unfortunately, even then, you would still be affected by the outside world. Unless you were that isolated from everybody else. Because it's just a thing, especially I think probably more so in our Western culture, that we learn things about fearing lack, fearing limit, fearing poor health, fearing what the other person is thinking of us, fearing if we're going to succeed, fearing if we're going to fail. There are so many things that we walk around with that we've just been taught since the time we were little tots on the way up, and we sort of build ourselves little by little as we go. And of course, there's wonderful parts to that, but the challenging part is that as we go through this process, so many of us, we act out of fear. We come from a place of fear in our daily world. Personally, I think I face a challenge like a lot of us do, the fear of financial insecurity, which is a big thing, especially in our culture, because we're just so bombarded, from the time we're young about, saving for retirement and, hearing all these challenging stories about people, losing their homes and all the different things that can happen. And of course, that instills in us some fear. And so we sort of, guard ourselves, and we get to work planning for ourselves and maybe our family, and we don't always have that love for everyone around us that the world initially did when it was first created, when God first created it. Love was all that was needed. Love, that was all that was needed. And it was the be-all of everything. And as I mentioned, as we grow up in this world, we learn to be fearful about our future and having an income, and also, how other people in the world are going to perceive us. Am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? Fear for our health. Am I going to survive this? Am I going to, go to the doctor and get a diagnosis that is going to just, turn over the apple cart on me and my whole family? And a lot of these things, they just build up and up and up and up in us, and we forget to be what it is that we were designed to be. Because when we were little babies, we just knew love. For the most part, anybody could pick us up if they cradled us. We stopped crying and we were happy and life was just wonderful. Then, as we grow up, we learn these things. We learn these from our school teachers and from the people around us, and oftentimes our parents. I know, since the time I was 18, my dad, I don't think I ever had a conversation with him that didn't end with, "Now, did you start that savings account? Did you start that savings account?" He's always been on me about that. And so, you develop these fears, and so we stop being so radiant and giving of ourselves and everything that we can, because we are afraid and we're protecting for our future and the future of our families. So it's a good time to stop and step back and realize that the most important thing is love. The most important thing is love, to be loving to all of those around you. And more importantly, because like I said, as I've said so often, it's easy to love the lovable. Of course, your children, a teddy bear, a puppy dog, that's easy to love. The unshaven, unshowered, homeless guy who approaches you on the street, a lot of times we become reserved and protective, or we cross the street not to have to deal with that situation because we've stopped learning how to love for one another. We've stopped learning how to be caring. I went to a seminar a while back on homelessness, and I've attended so many since we started our program here. And one of the speakers said, most people are homeless, not necessarily because they ran out of money, but because they ran out of relationships. because there was no one else they could turn to. Because so many people are, we find ourselves in that space where we are protecting ourselves and our resources for ourselves and our families. And so people on the street in that situation are no longer our fellow humans as God had intended us to be, as we read in the scriptures, but we become living from a place of fear rather than a place of love. And so it's wonderful to be able to take this time and realize that we were created of love. And I'm certainly not suggesting that, you open the doors of your home and throw everything out for everybody to get and, leave yourself in a precarious situation. But certainly just to be aware of the need to show love to everyone, not just the people who are easy to love, but those that are challenging to love. People in prison for, whatever crime they committed. As we talk about so often, we are perfect, spiritual, and divine. So we are perfect. We may do imperfect things, but that doesn't stop us from being perfect human beings. And so as we look at people in these situations, we need to understand that that is still a perfect person. They may have done an imperfect thing, but that is life. Because we know at the bottom line is we're spiritual beings, but we're living this human experience, and the idea of it is to become a better spiritual being. And so as we go through this process of life, we need to be aware of the fact that we were put here to be loving, wonderful, warm, supportive people. If you could isolate children from the outside world where they didn't know or understand these fears that we instill in them, and they rose to adulthood and only knew about love and giving, that would be a wonderful thing, because that's how it was in the beginning. That's how it was in the beginning when the world was first created and man was first populating the world. Everybody looked out for each other. Early civilizations all lived in big communities, and everybody looked out for everybody. And we see that in even early Native Americans. Even, as you move further in time, we know that looking culturally, they all lived in these villages, and they were all close-knit, and they all took care of each other, and they all supported each other, and they all loved each other. And of course, we in our Western world, in this current civilization that we live in, we all go home and lock our doors and windows and, shut ourselves away. And what we need is love. Love is what we need. And so when we isolate ourselves to protect ourselves, we aren't allowing love to go out, or more importantly, love to come in. Love to come in. And love going out is just as important. I was rewatching the other day, probably a lot of you remember from maybe about 10 years or so ago, that film, Marvins Room. So there are two sisters, and I guess the father becomes ill, the father and the stepmother, and so one sister sort of at an early age goes and moves with them to take care of them. So pretty much most of her life is devoted to that, and then she gets a diagnosis of leukemia, and she needs to find a bone marrow match. And so she reaches out to the sister and her children, and they meet up, and at one point there's a feud, as they do in drama and films, between the two sisters, because, the one sister sort of left the other to take care of the family, and she was selfish and just, dealt with her own life. So the sister who had taken care of everybody said, no, you know what? It was wonderful. I don't feel like I missed out on anything because there was so much love. And, the other sister said, yeah, I imagine they loved you for taking care of them. And she said, no. I mean, I was able to give them love. That filled my life. Giving love is a life-filling thing. When you give it honestly and authentically, just for the purpose of being loving and giving, not with any expectation of anything in return. Wonderful, pure love is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So when giving and loving, the universal laws are in action. We see this in so many situations. If we think about it, we think about wonderful philanthropists in the world. And a lot of times we kind of think, well, they ended up with a boatload of money, so they're just giving parts of it away to people. But the reality is that because they're doing this authentically and out of love, their coffers keep getting filled up, because divine spirit is seeing this loving person is here just giving out of love and saying, okay, these are the universal laws. There's this vacuum being created because there's so much giving, so we're going to keep filling that coffer up. And, from the outside looking in, a lot of us say, well, that's these, big wealthy firms or person, and it doesn't, make it much of a difference to them because they have so much anyways. But they're authentically giving. They're just authentically giving. Oftentimes, we hear about the poor, struggling the little charity that could or couldn't, that struggles because it's, giving away resources, but it doesn't have the replenishment. And of course, we know that that's not in alignment with the universal laws. And so often, a lot of those organizations, if you look, they're attached with, their motivation is they think that they need to save your soul, and so they want from you to be this perfect person according to their definition of perfect. And of course, we know that with love, pure love, comes no judgment. As the scripture lesson that I provided was from the Revised Standard Edition, because I wanted it to be about love. Because in the Revised Standard Edition, they replaced the word charity with love. But in the King James Version, the word charity is in there. So rather than love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. So rather than love, it's charity. Charity is patient, charity is kind, it does not envy, and so on and so forth. And it does not keep a record of wrongs. And so I can't help but think that, some of these small organizations that you hear about where they're always in financial trouble, it's because their giving isn't pure. It's not pure. They have an expectation of something in return. They're going to take your soul and save you. And of course, if you have this expectation of somebody, that's not really pure love. So pure, authentic love is what we're here for. And we can all understand as human beings how wonderful it is to be loved. Share love with others as you would have them love you. And even if you find yourself in a place where you're just giving love, and I know that, sometimes parents feel that way, that all they ever do is give their children love, and all they ever get back in return is heartache. But it's there. It's just, sometimes the youth are it's hard for them to catch up and get on board with this. But so certainly if you're a parent, you can understand this thing of, you know what, you just love. And even if you feel like they're not loving you back, or they're not, and that's all you want is their love and affection. You don't have any desire. They don't need to do anything for you other than just love you and give you affection and respect. But certainly by consistently giving love, of course, what are you doing? But you're training them to be of love, and hopefully eradicating these fears that so many of us walk around with. This, the fear of being judged by other people, or the fear of having to judge other people, the fear of lack, the fear of limit, the fear of poor health, and all those other things that shape and mold us and take us away from a place of love and take us to a place of fear. So as you go through the week, the goal is in every circumstance and situation, you will turn to the love that is with you and within you. And indeed, we all have opportunities every day in every way to be a beacon of love, to show love. And the good news is that to live a life of love is inherently our goal in life. Pastor Mike used to say what I'm going to say in a minute, and I used to think, God, that's so morbid. But actually, it was probably a good attention getter for people to say, oh, wow, yeah. He used to so frequently say, and it's good to learn this and understand this and live this before they close the lid, because after that, you're going to find out anyways when you transition over. But wouldn't it be nicer to experience all of that while you're here? Experience the wonderment that God has for you. So to live a life of love is inherently our goal in life. That's what we were created for. We may stray off of the path, find fear replacing love, allowing us to act in fearful ways which do not bring us what we truly desire in life. Living a life of authentic love is indeed the truest path to a life of great happiness, great health, great prosperity, and great peace. Absolutely. So as you go forth during this week, and of course, as the holidays come closer, hopefully that becomes a little easier for people to do, to share the love and spread the love, and so many more opportunities will present themselves. And so be aware and be open to that, and let Spirit guide you and direct you to your very highest good in all of your giving and in all of your loving. And of course, that will allow you to have the divine laws replenish your reserves. And so you actually will probably end up being better off at the end, certainly from the love aspect, and a lot of times, those in the giving from your personal financial. We know that is a New Thought tenet that, prosperity is very cyclical. When you give, you receive, and you receive multiple times over what you've given out of love, out of true, authentic love. So that's a wonderful thing as we go into the holidays to think about.